There's a difference between a dog living longer and a dog actually feeling good during those extra years. Welcome to The Dog Who Asked for More, a podcast for dog parents navigating the messy, complicated parts of life with dogs that no one really prepares you for. Each week, you'll hear honest, rounded conversations that help you understand your dog more clearly, feel less alone in the challenges you're facing, and strengthen the relationship you're building together. If you've ever looked at your dog and wondered how many good years you might still have together, you are not alone. Today, we're looking at the difference between lifespan and health span, what actually influences how dogs age, and the small things that can change how good those years feel for them. Because sometimes aging shows up quietly, a little gray around the muzzle, a hesitation on the stairs, a dog who doesn't quite jump onto the couch the way they used to. And those moments can bring a lot of questions with them. I'm Em. I'm a dog mom, retired vet tech turned dog trainer, and canine nutritionist who works with overwhelmed dog parents who love their dogs deeply but feel stuck, burned out, or unsure what their dog actually needs. And today we're unpacking what it really means to support our dogs as they age and why the goal isn't just more years with them. It's making sure those years actually feel good. Dr. Kevin, after nearly 4 decades in veterinary medicine, when did you start noticing the difference between dogs simply living longer and dogs actually living better as they age?
It's been an evolution, Emily. I've been in veterinary practice for just over 40 years at this point in time. We've seen a clear evolution over that period. The reality is that early during that time, dogs and cats just simply did not live as long. They weren't being as well taken care of. Veterinary medicine is not near that back then what it is today. Only through the last 10 or 15 years have we really seen pets get to their full lifespan potential. And having said that, the work that I'm doing right now that I'm so passionate about is trying to extend pets' lives by an additional 20 to 25%. You and I are very familiar with a lifestyle curve that shows a decline in quality of life as a pet ages. My hypothesis is that if you and I work together, we can keep a pet's quality of life very high for an extended period of time before all of a sudden it turns south. And the difference in that is can add up to 25% in our pets' lives. And that's very important to me.
Being in veterinary medicine for 40 years is a long time. So I really commend you for that. I worked in the vet med space for about 10 years and I would have stayed in the vet med had it not been for medical challenges. But it is such a fast paced industry and there's a lot of crazy things that happen during the day. And it's a lot of ups and downs emotionally as a human. You do really have to compartmentalize your emotions during the day when things are happening because it's hard and it's sad and it's scary sometimes and you can't break down in those moments. You kind of have to charge through and then go home and break down afterwards. So 40 years of that is extremely commendable. And I do agree with you. I do think that there's a big difference between understanding this commercial way of living with our pets and a more natural way of living with our pets. And there's a big difference between how that affects their lifespan. The bigger part of that picture is that a lot of dog parents don't start thinking about aging until something happens. So, in your experience, what are the moments that usually make people realize their dog might be entering a different stage of life?
Well, I agree wholeheartedly with you. I think a lot of folks simply don't want to recognize the aging of their pet. I'm a good example of getting gray as you age. And you notice a little bit of gray around a pet's muzzle or across the back of their head, and you don't think much of it. But only when you start noticing behavioral changes. Dogs you don't want to go up and down the stairs, cats who no longer jump onto the furniture, sometimes slips and falls that would not have taken place. You start really thinking my pet is aging and how can we slow that process down. Now, unfortunately, a large part of my practice is now centered around cancer care. And of course, there's nothing like hearing the words, your pet has cancer, to light a fire under somebody. And all of a sudden that pet owner becomes the world's most motivated pet parent to help their pet. The concern that I have is that many times, as with anything else, the earlier you and I start in our pet's longevity journey, simple things by perhaps looking at a different lifestyle or a different diet or beginning the right supplement. Sometimes these things can make all the difference in bending the curve and extending that health span for our pets.
Those moments of realization are really tough. as pet owner, as a person in our medical
Sure.
history, when things start to happen, something scary happens, and it sometimes it puts us on the right path, and sometimes it puts us on the right path temporarily. So finding those moments of what we can do better is super important. But I also think that learning what those missed moments, something that we could have changed earlier, could potentially help us with the dog's future, but also maybe the next future dog. That is where that latent learning comes in, because we have that time to think about it and process it.
Surely.
And then maybe it's
Yeah.
several years later that we were like, yeah, maybe I should have taken care of that sooner. And hopefully from that point, we can go forward and be better. But it's always a learning curve with dogs, always.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Something you talk about a lot is health span versus lifespan, which is a very important distinction. How do you explain the difference to families in a way that helps them feel empowered instead of overwhelmed?
Well, the analogy that I quite frequently use, Emily, is that of my mother. And I love her and I missed her, but she was a smoker for 50 some odd years. And as a result, she played all the smoking games, including lung cancer. And the last 2 years of her life, she was functionally alive, but she was confined to a hospital bed because of the spread of that lung cancer to her bones. And that's a very clear cut example of health span versus lifespan, because it's one thing for you and me or for our loved pets to live a long time, but to gradually lose the fire, to lose the enjoyment of going for a walk or hopping up onto the bed to sleep with us or whatever the case may be. And my goal is to do whatever I can. And we can talk a little bit more about this if you'd like, to increase the health span of a dog. So we're not just increasing functional lifespan, but we're increasing the time that that dog is emotionally and physically with us. More walks, more swims at the beach, more jumping up onto the sofa just to be with you and watch some TV or read or whatever the case may be. Those are the times that matter to pet parents. And those are the times that matter to pets. And I think that working together, you and I and our pet parents can extend that health span for our pets.
When you look back across your entire career, tell me some of the things that tend to influence how dogs age long before they become senior dogs.
I'll give you the most obvious one first, and that is the question around obesity. It's interesting in that Purina back in the day, it was about 15 years ago, they did a study and they took a group of Labrador litters and they divided them in half so that half the puppies were in one group, half the puppies were in another group. One group, they fed about three quarters of the calculated normal diet. The other group, they fed as much as they wanted. And over their lifespan, the dogs who were on calorie restriction lived up to about 18 months longer on average than the dogs who ate a higher quantity ration. And so the moral to the story is this: if you want one simple way, if you want the cheapest thing in the world to do to help your dog live longer, it's simply in general to feed them less. I start with the basics because you and I can now talk about supplements. We can talk about the value of lifestyle. We can talk about the value of prescription longevity drugs. But so many people want just a one place to start. And the quality and the quantity of their diet is a great choice.
So let's talk about diet, because it is a huge passion topic of mine. I went out and
Okay.
became a certified professional canine nutritionist because I got so involved in it. A lot of veterinarians don't agree with what I do and how I feed, and then there's a lot of veterinarians that do. So I'd love to see where you fall on that spectrum, and what your feelings on gut health and nutrition are when it comes to kibble or other brands of dog food that are dehydrated or frozen raw brands. What is your feeling on that topic?
Well, this is something you and I could speak for an hour on, because I will tell you that I'm 66 at this point. I've had dogs all my life, and up until about the last 10 years or so, those dogs got kibbles. But I think there's increasing evidence, and a lot of it, Emily, that tells us that kibbled diets are not a healthy product for our pets day in and day out. And there are a number of different reasons for that, including the fact that in order to form those kibbles, to get them to glom together, there has to be extra sugar, extra starch in there. The fact that many kibbles on a traditional level are baked at high temperature creates advanced glycation end products, or AGEs, which are actually pro inflammatory and can cause cancer in many of our pets. And so I think that over the last 10 years or so, there's been study after study that has shown the benefit of home cooked or raw or, some of the premium quote, human grade ingredient diets. And that's what this little pup of ours named Annabelle, we home cook for her for that reason.
I love that. I think that it is so great that there are so many veterinarians jumping on board because we get into this habit of this is how it is. This is what we're supposed to do. This is how the industry made it for us. It's easy. Grab a bag off the shelf and feed our dogs. But the hardest lesson for me when I was going through everything with the dogs, nutrition wise, was learning how much sugar is in that food. And that sugar just feeds cancer. So if you have a dog that has cancer and you're feeding him kibble, you're literally just feeding the cancer. And just destroys me to think how many dogs stayed sick or got sicker because of their diet and something simple that could have been changed if the information had been out there and readily available to people.
It's true. And I think that when you speak of cancer care in particular, there are a number of different studies that point out the benefit of ketogenic diets for pets or for humans with cancer. Because as you suggest, it's commonly believed that cancer cells feed preferentially on the sugar that is floating through our bodies. And so, whatever you and I can do to lower blood sugar will also help to retard cancer growth. And that's where ketogenic diets come into play.
Absolutely. It's just another one of those areas that we have to educate on because people don't know. It's always interesting when I find a vet that's like pro home cooked, pro raw diet because it is so easy to just jump onto the industry chain and say, this is what's best for our dogs.
I would say a couple different things that, and one I do want to address with raw diets is this. I am a believer in raw diets for pets, but only if safely prepared, because I have seen 3 different cases of dogs dying in my professional practice due to bacterial contamination of raw diets. And so if you choose to use a raw diet, you better be darn sure of your diet's source. And not to plug one company, but there's a company called Instinct Diets out there, and they're using a specific form of pasteurization. It gets away from the issues of bacterial contamination in raw diets. Please just be a little bit cautious with those raw diets. But the second point I wanted to make, Emily, is that you're entirely correct. During the 36, 37 years I was actually in clinical practice, Hills, for instance, the kibble manufacturers of the world would quite frequently come through and offer to put lunch and learns in place. They would come in and buy our clinic staff lunch in an effort to go ahead and educate them, quote unquote, around the benefits of a kibble diet. But the reality is clear at this point in time. There are better approaches to dietary therapy for our pets. If you want your pet to live their longest life, kibbles are probably not a way to go.
Let's talk about some of the changes that dog parents should start noticing as their dogs are aging that maybe are not as commonly talked about or just easily recognizable to somebody who has maybe only had one dog or no dogs prior to. What would be some things that you would want them to start noticing about their aging pet earlier?
I'll harken back to activity level. The reality is that my goal as a longevity veterinarian is to do whatever I can to keep that pet as happy and healthy as possible. And so the one thing that we can count on is that our dogs generally love to eat. The old wives' tale, quote unquote, about watching their appetite doesn't really pay off over the longer term. But watching the way a pet plays, watching the way they choose to interact with the humans in their family or the other pets in their family gives us a large clue as to how that pet is aging. The thing that's important for your listeners to understand is that by the time you see signs of aging, many times it's too late to reverse those. And so one of the things that in my practice I tend to focus on is taking a preemptive stance against these things. And so even as young as 4 to 5 years of age, these small dogs, the pets under 25 pounds, ought to be having yearly anesthetic dentals to remove infection and inflammation from their mouths. The larger breed dogs, the dogs that are more prone to allergies and orthopedic disease, those are the ones that we have to pay religious attention to and keeping their weight down, watching what they eat, getting early and accurate diagnoses as to why they're itching or why they are limping so that we can solve that. Because the one thing we know is that the longer your pet limps, the longer your pet itches, the longer your pet has GI symptoms, the shorter they will live. There's a clear link at this point between inflammation for both humans and for pets and a shorter lifespan. So your goal and my goal is to do whatever we can working together as a pet care team to reduce inflammation early in the game.
Absolutely. And there are many, many, many ways to do that, but every solution is not going to be right for every dog. And that is where you find a longevity medicine doctor like Dr. Kevin so that you can talk about what your options are. Speaking of options, longevity medicine has started to include lots of things like supplements, nutrition adjustments, and medications that are aimed at supporting long term health. What excites you the most about where veterinary medicine is headed in this space?
Well, this will be a longer answer for you because I think many veterinarians, Emily, just simply aren't equipped to develop a longevity strategy for your pet. There's a great trend towards corporatization in veterinary medicine, where the veterinary clinics that you and I go to are no longer owned by individual veterinarians, but rather by these huge corporate entities that dictate exactly what medications can be recommended and how long a veterinarian can spend talking with you. And so the first step, I think, is to find a veterinarian that you can develop a partnership with so that you can ask them questions and they can ask questions of you and you can respectfully disagree with each other and still be friends. But in direct answer to your question, so many people aim towards prescription longevity drugs as being the only answer for their pet in terms of improving their longevity or their health span. The reality is, I think it starts at home. We've spoken already about nutrition and the place for a good diet. But what if I told you that every time your golden retriever or your German shepherd goes up and down a set of stairs, they are shortening their life? What if I told you that every time that poodle of yours comes running around the corner as you get home from work, slips and falls on the hardwood floor or that tile, they are shortening their life? These are things that are very real for many pets, and they create inflammation that not only create pain, but also will shorten their lives. So we've talked about diet, we've talked about lifestyle. There is a place for early diagnostics to understand exactly how our pets are aging. Because where our pets will be 5 years from now, Emily, is dictated by two things. First off, where they are from a health perspective right now. And secondly, is a pet parent developing a plan to help them age as gracefully as possible. And once we understand where a pet's health is right now, then you and I can sit and chat about supplements that are custom designed for that pet and the use of prescription longevity drugs like rapamycin and acarbose, which have been proven in every species study to date to increase health span by up to 14%. That's over a year or more for most of our pets. If you're asking me what I'm most passionate about, it is the use of longevity science to bring better health span to the pets in my care.
Love that answer. Anything that we can do to help our pets live longer, happier, healthier lives so that we can spend as much time as possible with them during their short stay through our longer life is it's just so important because it is such a precious, wonderful relationship. And
It is
as
indeed.
much as I've enjoyed every single relationship with each of my dogs individually, there are a couple of dogs I wish that could have been around longer for sure.
Understand. I've had a couple of lifetime dogs myself, and so I still talk to them. It's been 8 years on the one hand, and about 18 years for the other dog, and I still talk to them. There's nothing that's more special than the loving relationship between a parent and a pet.
I completely agree, and it's been 14 years for the one that I lost the longest ago, and I still talk to him too, so I love that that's not just me. I love that
No,
you do that too.
absolutely.
Before we wrap up, I want to pause for something we call answering the ask. This is where behavior stops being something to fix and starts being about communication. Over the years, is there a dog you remember supporting their health earlier in the aging process that made a noticeable difference in the quality of their life? And what did that look like?
Well, one pet that comes to mind is a dog named Joey Handler. He was a black lab that lived in Iowa, and he was diagnosed with oral melanoma, which is a very serious malignancy within the mouth. And he was given 4 months to live. But his mom, Diane, and I worked together, and we ended up prescribing rapamycin for him, along with an aggressive course of supplemental therapy. And Joey lived another almost 4 years, and during that time, they went to Montana twice annually, and so Diane would send me pictures of Joey swimming in a lake or wading in a river, and it was just so rewarding to me because he beat all the odds when it came to the survival of a dog with a malignancy.
What a cool story. 4 years is a long time. That's
'Cause
incredible.
yeah, yeah, it was, and he enjoyed every minute of that, so, it fills my heart with joy to think about my pal Joey Handler.
For someone listening who loves their dog deeply and hopes for many good years together, what do you hope they understand about supporting their dog's health over time?
Well, I think there are three different components to offering your pet their longest health span. First is finding a veterinarian, finding somebody that you can partner with. Not all veterinarians deal with longevity. Not all veterinarians are good listeners. So it's really important that you find a partner in crime that you can talk back and forth with and answer your questions effectively. The second component is consult medicine. This is really veterinary care 3.0, where you and I work together to develop a plan, not just for the next 3 months or not just for the next 6 months, but a 5 year or a 10-year plan, laying out specific tests that we need to run to keep your dog as healthy as possible. The supplements, the lifestyle that we've spoken about, the diets that we've talked about, the prescription longevity drugs that you and I can use on a daily basis to extend your pet's lifespan by up to 25%. And then the third component is just simply the execution. There are things that you can do at home without spending any money with a schmo like me. Stop feeding your pets so much. When you do feed them, making sure it's the highest quality food you can afford, as Emily has spoken about. Watch the stairs. And sometimes a child's gait across those stairs can extend your dog's lifespan by up to 6 or 8 months, just simply by eliminating the ups and downs, the slips and falls that accompany hardwood floors or tiles. Put a lot of throw rugs or yoga mats down or in the traffic pattern that your dog has. And then the one thing I would mention is that when you and I go to supplement stores like Chewy, you can pick from 1,000 different supplements. But the reality is, many of them, as an example, glucosamine and chondroitin for painful joints, have been totally disproven. They simply don't work. And yet they're advertised and sold in every retail store around the world. We carry only 17 supplements, but I can tell you exactly why they work for your pet and exactly how your pet will benefit from them. And then the last component is the prescription longevity drugs that we've talked about. If you work with a longevity veterinarian like me, you and I can use the latest in prescription drugs brought straight from human practice to help your pets live their longest and best life.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here today. Would you tell everyone how they can connect with you?
Well, thank you very much, Emily. I've really appreciated the time with you. And it's obvious that you really are passionate about your love for the pets as well. There are two different ways that people can get in touch with me. My website is www.helpingpetslivelonger.com because that's exactly what I and my team do 7 days a week. However, because I really appreciate the time that you've taken with me, I've created a special offer for your pet parents, for your listeners. And that is that if they want to go to www.freevetcall.com, that's freevetcall.com, you'll have access to a calendar, and I'll be happy to do a free 10-minute longevity strategy session with any one of your listeners that checks in.
Amazing. We will make sure that that link is down in the description for you guys so you can chat with Dr. Kevin and ask him all of your dog longevity questions.
You know what? We're all in this together, Emily, and I will help your pet parents however I can.
Well, we appreciate it. One of the things I kept thinking about during this conversation is how easy it is to believe that we have more time with our dogs than we actually do. Most of us don't start thinking about aging until something changes, a diagnosis, a limp, a dog who suddenly seems slower than they were a year before. And in those moments, it's really easy to start wondering if we should have done something sooner. But the truth is that learning about our dogs is always happening in real time. Every dog teaches us something new. Sometimes those lessons help the dogs in front of us, and sometimes they help the next dog who comes into our life. What matters most is that we keep paying attention because the goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. And the more we understand about things like inflammation, nutrition, lifestyle, and how our dog moves through the environment, the more opportunities we have to support them earlier. Not because we're trying to control everything, but because we love them and we want as many good years together as possible. If dog food labels feel confusing or leave you wondering what actually matters, the Dog Food Label Decoder Quiz will help you understand what to look for and where to start. The link is in the episode description. So be kind, spread joy, and remember, supporting your dog earlier can change how good their years together with you actually feel.